Basketball beat the wide bodies while MSU football got bodied in Champaign. We'll break it all down with East Lansing's most infamous couch, Graham Couch of the Lansing State Journal and Couch in the Rib podcast. You're listening to Can't Read, Can't Write. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Can't Read, Can't Write, the podcast that proves Spartans can talk. I'm Mike Jones, joined as always by the guy who knows a lot about fluffing, Kevin Greck, and the guy who finally watched a basketball game, Alex Plum. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Graham Couch, of course, great to see you. What's going on, guys?
I made use of my YouTube TV subscription for the first collegiate basketball reason this season, so that was great. And what a game to watch.
Yeah.
Hope springs eternal for these guys. Yikes.
I presume that means that's the last time you'll be doing that. And guys, do we want to cop to Graham how many different JD Vance jokes we were throwing around as his introduction before he joined, and then ultimately decided to throw them all away? Are we?
No, this is right. They weren't landing.
I don't see any of those on Blue Sky anymore, so I don't know anything about it.
I need to follow you on Blue Sky. I just got over there, Graham. I mean,
It's a happier place.
It is a happier place.
Much better place. It's just, the discussions are cleaner. It's just, it's a better vibe. It's a better vibe. I got to say,
They got some work to do.
I don't usually get the full trio when I'm out with you guys. Usually, I think Plum's been gone the last couple, maybe.
Well,
or whatever.
and I always hoped you wouldn't take it personal, Graham. But
It hurts.
As well, I couldn't miss 4 in a row. So here we are. You wouldn't believe the amount of caring I have to do for Kevin most weeks. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot out of me. So,
I mean, it's a lot of carrying. Like, these are truly desperate times for MSU sports fandom generally. So we needed to call in all of the big guns on this podcast to get anyone to listen. Basically.
Can I just briefly appreciate, as I just followed Graham on Blue Sky, that your cover photo is Boris Johnson bowing to the Queen.
To the Queen.
This is really great. Just really great. That's really great.
Well, we're gonna keep doing some visual gags, so you can check us out on YouTube. If
Better watch us on YouTube.
But we, of course, want to thank everyone for listening. And if we could ask a small favor, please share the pod with Spartans in your life. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Of course, you can find us on YouTube at Spartan_pod. We're currently on Twitter at Spartan_pod and on Instagram at Spartan_pod. Or if you want to go to the happy place, Blue Sky, we ditched the underscore. It's just at Spartan Pod. Check us out there. Plum, you want to give listeners a quick breakdown of what we're doing this episode, and then we'll get into it with Graham?
Well, whether it's 3 of us or 4 of us, we always start behind the green wall, where football this week will lead, even though we are not excited to talk about the walloping we endured in Champaign. We'll talk about Michigan State basketball, 1-1 on the week, women's basketball, hockey, and women's soccer, where there remains some hope for the dignity of MSU collegiate athletics. We'll then head off Grand River with a call-up updates, preview the Purdue game, and basketball, where we'll be playing Samford this week, and finally take your Twitter questions.
All right, let's get into it. Michigan State is whacked by the Illini, 16-38 in what was maybe the most, in some ways, disheartening of the games they've played this year. I mean, getting trounced by Indiana, it does not feel good, but I guess, Graham, you talk to a lot of fans. We live in our little 3-dude bubble here, but it's Bert Bielema at Illinois, and they're in the second tier at best of the Big Ten, and it felt like we got handled. Do you sense anything from fans or even from the staff that this is not where we should be?
Not yet from the staff, and again, I haven't spoken to anybody since the game from the staff. I should say that, but you sense fan frustration at a growing level, and some of that I think is fans have lived the last couple of years, and so it just compounds, right? And that's, while that's not really fair to put on the staff, that's the reality. It is, and then there are other dynamics. Whereas you talk about it being Illinois or Indiana being a first year coach as well, and there's lots of things, and the way the Michigan game was coached and handled, and what happened after that, and so there's a lot of it, and I do think the one thing about Illinois is that's year 4 for Bielema, right? That's supposed to be a season program. I don't know why expectations were low there to begin with. If year 4 for Jonathan Smith is an over-under set by Vegas of like 5 or 5.5, whatever it was for Illinois, that's a problem. Like that shouldn't be year 4. So that should be a more seasoned program than Michigan State. What you're seeing is just the reality is they were a program that lacked depth badly a year ago, and they have not really fixed that. And the offensive line, of course, is a tremendous problem. But you see it early on in the back end, and the young kids are playing. And it's a program that needs a lot still, and it needs all the same things largely that it needed a year ago, other than having Nick Marsh. So, which is, I guess, a good place to be or to build it.
Can I ask about that, Graham? Because in your column before the game, I think your second or third point was get the ball to Nick Marsh, and is one of the sort of secrets to that might portend success. And we didn't. I don't know if that was a successful strategy or not. I mean, the number of just lateral passes to Nick Marsh where he was immediately stuffed at the line or behind of scrimmage. We did not see the Nick Marsh, with a couple of exceptions. We did not see the Nick Marsh that this team needs to see, I think, to find success. Where do you revise any of that? I mean, and I know we can talk about the O-line. There's probably a lot to dissect there, but let's just talk about Nick for a second. And this was not his best game. Right.
He was targeted a number of times where they didn't connect. So it wasn't like they weren't trying to go to him. But I agree. Like, I don't think they've featured him as well as they can. And featuring somebody is not about just giving them the ball. It's about getting them the ball with the right matchups and space. Now, people know about Nick Marsh. Like, at this point, this is going to be the rest of his career.
Yeah.
He is the guy. Like, the other receivers are benefiting from him now. And you're starting to see that, and just the coverage is slanted toward him. And that's changed dramatically since the beginning of the season. You're just not going to see the looks he got, say, at Maryland, probably ever again. And the idea is you then have guys you can take advantage of it elsewhere. The thing with Marsh is, not to give a Mel Tucker quote, but Mel Tucker used to always talk about having 3 or 4 difference makers on both sides of the ball. Like, that's one legitimate guy, and you need 2 or 3 more of that. Now, not necessarily one at receiver or tight end, another at the backfield, somebody else like a left tackle, whatever it is. You need.
I was going to say anyone on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, and that the other thing that's hard to read as you just watch it is what they're limited by based on protection and based on their inability to run the ball and be on schedule on offense. It's weird that line looked like they were really making some strides with the Iowa game and early against Michigan, and then it's just basically the same group reverted back. And maybe there's some things that other teams have noticed on film, and I'll be interested to see what Jonathan Smith says about that on this week. But to me, that line of scrimmage, the offensive line has to be because I think a lot of what they can't do right now everywhere else stems from that. And I even struggle to fully judge Aiden Childs and his development. And there are some concerns there with certain decisions or other things or what he sees quick. But, I don't know how many young quarterbacks would be doing great in this circumstance. So that's the other thing. And then, you see a guy like Sam Levitt, Arizona State's trudging toward the playoff at this point. So that's another thing. You talk about the angst is coming from all sorts of directions because the things that Indiana, Sam Levitt, whatever it may be, the situation with the Michigan game, a schedule which has been just the opposite of Indiana's. Like Michigan State would have been 6-0 with Indiana's schedule,
right?
And then it's created a different dynamic in terms of, now they might have been getting the crap kicked out of them now, but if the schedule had flipped, but at least there would have been this sort of, momentum and some energy that they never got a chance to. And Indiana, like, I love that story, but I hate that they're playing 8 home games, and I hate that they got rid of the Louisville game to play Western Illinois. Those two things bother me. The rest of it, the schedule's nothing they can do about it. But those two things, I think, are kind of BS.
Talking about 4 guys getting going. Does everyone remember a Jack Valang? Valang?
I can't say that I've heard that name in at least a year.
Jacques Valang, I think is what it is. What is going on there? Is it just that it's as simple as they can scheme for him? It's hard for him to get open, like tight end routes take a while to develop, and we just don't have the time. Like we were promised that this is a difference maker. This is a guy that's really going to blow the lid off of things. He's not been a contributor in almost any games so far this season. Is this a guy that sticks around for next year, or not to like look forward and start moving the pieces around the board, but he seems to be healthy. He seems to be out there running around, but it's just not having an impact on the game.
2 things. One, this is why I'm a shitty guest. Plum asked me just to talk about Nick Marsh, and I talked about 40 other things in Nick Marsh for about 3 seconds. So
no, you got Marsh. I think we covered him. I think that was good.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't think he's that much of a difference maker. I think that's the thing. Like, I just think, one of the things I thought early on was if he's, if this guy is like an NFL caliber tight end, then why is he transferring?
Then why is he here?
Yeah. Maybe he wants to do one more year, and I've seen that before, and there are lots of guys who don't know. There's one of the first guys I covered was that position was Tony Scheffler. And Scheffler had no idea that he was like an NFL tight end. He applied for an extra year of eligibility, he didn't get it, so had to go to the NFL, and then wound up being a second-round pick. So sometimes these guys don't realize they're that good. So maybe that was why he transferred in. But he's no Tony Scheffler. Like there's just not that kind of speed or athletic difference maker to him. It's not that can't be a solid player, but I do think the expectations for him were overblown. I at some point want to go back and look at some of the early quotes because I want to know where they came from and like what made those expectations. Like, was that stuff from Aiden Childs saying this guy's amazing? And players always sort of,
It's probably Sheehan. Shouldn't listen to that podcast. Yeah. It's terrible.
I don't know where it was, but there's no doubt. There's just that juice. He doesn't quite have it to be a next level difference maker.
Yeah.
Well, so I think let's to dial it back into the actual Illinois game. We should pivot to the defense in a second because I think more than anything, it's clear there's a real problem over there. Notwithstanding, I think there's some questions about Joe Rossi and some of the decisions in this game, but like there's been things to be encouraged about on the defensive side. On the offensive side, what's so fascinating to me is that they made DJ Uiagalelei look like a good quarterback last year. And so I appreciate that Aiden Childs just had actually maybe his best game, at least on paper, it was his best game. But somehow there's something happening here where they just, I don't know, they're not able to do anything meaningful. And maybe, hey, having a Joe Moore finalist offensive line 2 years in a row is the difference maker. Maybe it's that simple. But I don't know. It feels like at times Brian Lindgren hasn't recognized that they can't run the ball and hasn't seemingly done anything to account for that. Like way too many deep routes this past game, which led to all those sacks. Anyone else here? Yeah.
I think he's struggling to find a rhythm with this team. I think he would tell you he's had some games that aren't his. But I think it's hard to be a coordinator when you can't run the ball and you don't believe your line can protect the quarterback. I think it's not a fun job. Yeah. And you talk. These guys like to get in a rhythm when they know they can do something, they count on something, and we've seen that in a few moments this year, and then they've looked pretty good. For me, it's with that, I mean, you think about what Oregon State had in that offensive line and how effective they were running the ball and the yards per carry closer to 5-6 a carry. Like that's it. That's you talk to offensive coaches, they'll tell you that. I mean, like we won't know about Brian Lindgren really until they've got a line in terms of what his ceiling is. And now, are there some coordinators out there that could do more with when they don't have anything? Maybe there are some, and Michigan State certainly hasn't had any of them.
Yeah.
I've been covering them. So it lends me to think that there aren't a ton of them out there. I think that if you do have a veteran quarterback and you have enough playmakers, you can scheme more. And I mean, I think if like Marsh were a year from now, and I don't know if what Childs will be, but I think there is a point in time where they could better get by with what they have because they've got young guys figuring it out while they've got a line that can't run. Because they've got running backs, 2 guys who are solid running backs.
It's not Nate Carter's fault when he's getting grabbed as soon as he gets handed the ball. Like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? I have a hard time getting mad at him. There is history being made actively right now, gentlemen. The longest sack drought in football history, basically ongoing. The other side of the ball, it's not just the offensive line that's not getting it done. It's also the defensive line who are celebrating their 2 tackles for loss, I think, in this game, if memory serves. Just because, woof. How does it get this bad? And also, it seems like defense is an area where our injuries are really starting to accumulate and really starting to impact the game. I know Coach Smith said in his press conference, the freshmen got a lot of reps this week, but still, like, they're getting picked apart out there, and the other guys aren't coming back. I mean, there's not a whole lot of game time left. There's only 2 more games in the regular season to play, but it seems unlikely that they're coming back. Does this team have the horses, Graham Couch, do you think, to win the next 2 games? Is it possible on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, yeah, I mean, Purdue is really bad. So they should, I mean, I think they should be able to put up points against Purdue. Rutgers, I think, will be competitive. And that, you got a one-off at the end of the season to go 6-6. I think before the year, just if you looked at that outside and said, okay, that's not the worst thing, if that's what this year wound up being. I think it's the way it's played out. But yeah, defensively, I don't know if I've ever you guys can probably correct me on this because I've gotten a lot wrong, but I don't know that I've ever been so wrong in my head, at least, about thinking something was going to be a strength and then watching
and then it was very obviously not a strength.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the game where I thought, the hell happened to that pass? Like, because it seemed like early on, they did it. I mean, they did it pretty creatively with layers, and they were coming after people. And I know, the opponents have changed a little bit, but it seemed like this was going to be something they could at least rely on. And they were going to be an aggressive group that tackled well in space. And I thought that stuff was like, okay, that's established. And it just didn't stick. And I think they've got some okay guys there. They don't have a lot of guys that scare you, but Vogel's been solid at times. I mean, in this game, I thought they did a nice job in the second half. They grew into the game. And they did get some pressure, and I thought Rossi had a pretty good half there. I think that will be an area though that through I'm less concerned about that as a program building situation than I am the offensive line because I just don't think you can go anywhere until this gets fixed. I don't think you can do anything. I don't think you can be relevant. I don't think you can have any sort of success that's meaningful until they figure out how to develop a line. And they have a coach that's well regarded. I was out in Oregon. It wasn't the Oregon State. They weren't playing Oregon State, but the guy who covers Oregon came over and chatting with us. And Mahalchek, the offensive line coach, he's like, that guy's a wizard. Like if he has time and he gets some guy, like he will get that thing going. Everybody there was really impressed with what he did at Oregon State. So from that standpoint, I think they probably have the right guy to do it. But it's almost a decade in. At this point, they need a different approach to recruiting the line. I've said for a long time, I think the NIL is Like they should have a separate NIL just for the offensive line.
Just
Be the
for offensive line.
NIL school. Call it whatever you want. Sink your money into that. Of course, you got to pay for your quarterback. You're always going to do that. You got to have enough playmakers and whatever. But if you always have a strong offensive line, you'll be playing meaningful football in November every year. Your down years will be 8 wins, and you'll be fine. And that's really what you want.
This concerns me, Grab, and you brought it up, is right now, 24/7's highest rated recruiter in the nation is someone we know well, Chris Kapp, down at Alabama. Is it possible that there's just no fixing? Like there's some kind of curse that's happened to MSU, and it doesn't matter the talent of the O-line coach. Like there's just not anything to be done. Like, can this be turned around with MSU being rated the 16th best recruiting class or whatever it is in the Big Ten for next year so far, and the talent that is kind of being retained from the Mel Tucker era? Is there upside here, or is it just like we're going to wander around in the wilderness of the offensive line?
Well,
until a miracle happens.
I'm just going to tack onto that on the back end because you've got 2 redshirt freshmen, I think, at the tackles right now. You've got a tackle who's playing right guard, and then you have Tanner Miller, who was supposed to be excellent and has been fine, like at center, and you have Luke Newman, who's an FCS transfer, but like, high hopes at left guard, but he's gone. So I think you're losing all 3 interior dudes. Like, is there a reason to feel like this could actually change next year when you lose that much?
Yeah, well, the hope is that it's a position where you do get a lot better as you develop and get older, and it's a hard position to be good young, and they do have some young guys that are somewhat intriguing. That's the hope, right? I mean, I don't trust it until I see it at this point. I thought they recruited okay at that position. They didn't keep all those guys, but they recruited pretty well at that position with the previous staff, and you're seeing that now. Offensive line is also a position that's just different in recruiting. Like, I think their recruiting rankings for me are more concerning skill position wise than they are offensive line. I mean, you think about the best offensive lineman they had, the guy who may have been the crux of the D'Antonio era was a preferred walk-on, right? Left tackle with the 8th pick in the NFL draft. There's a kid in this area. You look at like when PJ Fleck took that Western team to, they had a kid from Okemos who was a 2nd round pick, who Michigan State didn't even want. It was like a 2-star. And they had a number of guys, like offensive line, because these kids develop, they're just different types of kids. It's a hard position to recruit. It's an easy position to get wrong. And it's a position where you have to sort of trust the staff's evaluation of the guys they're bringing in. So that one, I'll reserve judgment and see what they're able to do. It's also a harder position to get transfers because offensive linemen don't transfer as much. They tend to get somewhere they're comfortable. If they're doing well, they're not moving.
Right.
And so it's a harder position to also repair quickly. So they're going to have to do some of it in-house. That's why I think the idea of like some sort of making that a focus of NIL and trying to pry some kids away from people with some fairly lucrative offers is worth it because it's hard. It's hard to convince these guys to move. They're not. It's not the diva position. They've just they've been growing up as kind of the fat kid in school, and it's they're not like they get to a place where they're treated well and they're comfortable and they're starting and they're being taken care of, and why the heck would they leave that?
Yeah. I thought that's what the Jolly Pumpkin free dinner once a week thing was supposed to open up for us. Like what happened to that? That was supposed to be a game changer. But I'm not seeing.
It would have been enough for me. I don't know what people want.
That's what I'm saying. Man, well, I would have been thrilled with that.
Greg, I think you and I were chatting after either the loss or it felt like a loss to Bowling Green. About the allocation, and so like I think we can do this conversation in 2 parts, but like Graham, you're a bit more plugged in on this. So like, can you give us a salary breakdown of each player first, and then second comment on like? No, but it feels like there's a misallocation of resources happening right now. I think, Greg, to steal your phrase, like Aiden Childs is getting paid enough money that like why would you're invested as a team at this point in time, right? Like and but yet it's worth asking the question of, does he need competition? because again, they made DJ look good, right? Like Nick Marsh, great ROI. Xavier Booker, I don't know what we're doing here. Like, and so the last staff wasn't great at it either. They had a JUCO transfer getting, I think, an insane amount of money to sit on the bench.
Yeah, Blackstock. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry for the rant here, but I wonder if do you have any insight into I guess how they're allocating this stuff? Because there was the article that they was it Yahoo, Greg, that had on Narduzzi?
Yeah, where he was like, "I'm going to burn the whole thing down, build it."
And he's like, "I'm paying 5 dudes, and if you do well at the end of the year, I'll give you some money."
Yeah.
Like
so, Graham.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a sense on certain numbers for a lot of these guys. I just don't. It's probably some reporting I need to try to dig into beyond. I know they've got like 5 guys, or this is Sparta, and the rest of the team is Spartan NIL, and they have fairly large, payments due at the end of the year, at the end of the spring. I mean, it's a lot. I think MSU will be one of the places that is better off when more of this is in house. I think MSU. I think the mid-tier schools. What I mean by that is that the non-top 10 schools, but schools that are like in that next 10 to 40 in terms of finances and all that stuff that they're the haves, but they're not really Ohio State. Those schools are going to benefit from what's about to happen because and I think that really is a test of your athletic department then too, because now it's on you to start making these decisions. I think they're hard decisions to make though, because you do have to have a philosophy on it. I think you have to be willing to lose guys to keep that philosophy in terms of like, we're not going to overpay for this. We're not going to, because I think there is a risk of damaging things in the locker room. There's a risk of, you can't have a corner who is, you can't bring in a corner who's making more than Charles Brantley.
Right.
Because that guy's going to go somewhere else then, you can't, that is a tricky thing to maneuver in a new day and age. When then if somebody else then offers that kid, if money is all that matters to certain kids, you're really, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to do. I think they have learned some lessons. They learned some lessons with the last staff learned them the hard way. I mean, and I give the last staff a little bit of a pass in the sense that all of this was new as it was happening. Like they didn't understand. They were off by like 4 times how much it was going to cost to fund a team every season initially. Like they didn't have any sense of it. But nobody really did. It wasn't until Ryan Day in one press conference was like, I need $13 million just to keep my roster intact. That was eye-opening for a lot of people. It was like, whoa, is that? I mean, so some of this has happened really quickly in real time. But yeah, in terms of, I think the challenge with somebody like, say, Childs, for example, you're going to have to pay a top-tier quarterback all the time. And the problem is you invest in him differently, and it almost makes your ability to challenge him different. Much more pro style. You can't just replace somebody middle of the year, or if you still, if you decide you want to replace them, you're replacing them for the long haul. It's very hard to say, hey, we think you need to sit down for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe you get a kid with parents who are up for that, and down, most of them aren't. I mean, I think the best thing you can do is Izzo likes this with like Jace Richardson. You want to recruit kids of athletes who are
really rich.
Who have perspective. Like look at Arch Manning got at Texas. We started almost anywhere, and there's a level of patience because he comes from a family that understands to be a good NFL quarterback, you need a lot of reps in college. That's usually the best way to go, and you don't need to be in a rush to get them. You want to be ready when it's time. Right. And like it's not everybody has that parent. Usually somebody's got some dumb uncle somewhere who wants them to do this quickly.
Wants them starting day one and get out of there if you're not, if there's any trouble at all.
I do want to say something. When Plum's this quiet for this long, I get nervous. On the podcast usually, and even like right now.
I'm just soaking it in, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm so angry at this program and everyone involved in it that it's not additive to the dialogue, and at least you're giving us reasonable facts. The things I want to say can't be even edited out. You have to just sort of block out my square.
I was literally going to turn to you because I think you have a particular area of expertise here. So special teams, is no.
Mm.
Special teams. As the deacon on the podcast,
Mm.
it is well known that, as was pointed out to us by a listener, that we shouldn't make fun of Jonathan Kim because he's a God-fearing man.
That's right.
But my dude
forgot to
missed
pray.
an extra point.
Forgot
And this
to
is, I
pray
believe,
this
is that, so. Is that? Did he not take communion? What happened here? Like, but
There's something.
special
There's-
teams is devolving at this point in time. The punt
It's not just
return
special
for
teams. It's all of it. It's all of it. I mean, you look the team that played Illinois is not the same team that played Iowa. That's the thing I can't get my head around. And Graham, if you've been listening to us, you know, because I've said this with some consistency, the thing that Jonathan Smith told us before the season began was, don't judge us only on wins and losses because you're going to be disappointed. Judge us on progress, incremental progress within position groups, within players, within coaching schema, whatever it is, look for incremental progress. And I'm suggesting that what we got on Saturday is not what we got several weeks ago. So what the fuck is happening? Because this is not incremental progress. And I'm losing the capacity to hold hope. And I know that they're just guys. You know, I mean, Chris Solari was in the locker room with them and interviewed Montori Foster and Darius Snow. It was actually a good piece. And, you know, we're not too high on Chris. We like to give him a hard time. But it was a good piece because he got some really useless nuggets from those two. Just dumb, empty platitudes. Well, we just got to work harder together. We just got to keep our connection strong. Like just asinine, useless horseshit that doesn't tell us anything. This is what I mean. This is why I was being quiet. That doesn't tell us anything. There's no insight. So I'm fumbling here because what Jonathan Smith told us at the beginning of the season was look for incremental progress. Ain't happening. Talking to the players who we've just talked about are getting lots of money and there's no real accountability. And of course, these guys, it's hard. They've been through D'Antonio quitting very quickly and then whatever the Bell Tucker years were. And now that, you know, so you see what I'm saying? So it's so muddled. And this is the basic fan frustration that I think you alluded to earlier. I'm embodying it now for those of our listeners.
So there are a couple things to say in regard to that. You're two things. One, when you were first turning the plum for expertise, I was hoping my favorite segments are the soccer refereeing segments.
That's right.
That's what I was really hoping for. But I would also like on Jonathan Kim, I would like media training to be. It's okay to be religious. That's who you are. You should be true to yourself.
100%.
But as soon as you make that why you made a field goal, you become completely uninteresting to me.
100%.
And I'm not going to tell your story. Like I think there's probably more to Jonathan Kim than that. Maybe there's not, but I just like, I mean, Nate Carter is a very similar guy in a lot of ways, and he's gotten a lot better at that. And he's been really good this year, I thought. And when I sat down with him, what seems like 10 years ago, but it was just the beginning of last season, you know, there was a lot of really good stuff there. And so, I wish Jonathan would give us a little more.
Can I just make an aside there? Because I know that this isn't something you or Chris or anyone will do, but I think it would be fair for you to do this. Jonathan, I heard you say you were grateful to God for that, you know, super long three that you got. Where was God when you missed the
right.
point after? You know, because that's the question you guys aren't going to ask, but you would and as a theologian, let me just say, fair question. The interesting question.
And as a cafeteria Catholic, let me just tell you, that was God's plan. That's God's plan.
My dream is the athlete who comes in and just says, you know, F God. Like, what the hell happened?
God is dead.
God is dead.
Full Nietzsche.
We're done. We are done here. I'm definitely not going to church tomorrow. That would make my year. But to the other point about, you know, just not, you know,
the incremental progress.
The progress part. Yes. So it was you saying that repeatedly that reminded me, because he has said that I asked him that question a week ago Monday about how do you then, if you don't have the players that you did before, like how do you then judge what progress looks like, right? Because that's the question. I mean, that's really the question. If you're missing the entire secondary that you planned on having, you know, how do you how do you look at that? And so he talked about each individual then playing at their best. I guess that's a harder thing to read. Right now, it does not look like progress. I don't think there's any question. It's not progress.
Yep.
Yeah, he said will play our best football in November is what he said.
Correct.
And then he changed it to, well, for the freshmen, they're playing really well. Well, Jonathan, I don't know if that's true because I didn't see them before.
Yeah, there is some good footballs. We're just saying there's some good football out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument still if they win the next two games and they play well against Rutgers and they go to 6-6 and in the last two games of the year they're playing decently. The vibes are different. That he'll be able to stand by that. But I do think what we saw in the second half against Michigan, against Indiana after the first quarter, and then most of Illinois, flies in the face of that, and that's something they're going to have to. I mean, there's a real possibility. You can still believe the Jonathan Smith era has a chance to be good, and I think it's only fair to give them that chance.
Yeah,
because it's year one. But you can also say that year one wasn't a success. I think those are two. Those don't have to be. You don't have to have one to have the other. And there's a real chance that we're going to look at this first year and say, this may still work, but that wasn't great.
Yeah, and before we move on to hoops, I think the pod talked about earlier in the year that we found this, we kind of hated this team because we saw that they were better than we anticipated. And yet, we saw careless turnovers and just idiocy at times that led to them tripping over their own dicks and not winning games. But it feels like now we're actually seeing, well, maybe this team isn't very good at all. And so it's been this combination of at times feeling like we could see a really great team, that there might be a great team in here. And yet we watch this Illinois game and it's like, well, we haven't recorded a sack in a century. And, they're just, it'll be, if we get to 6-6, I think just as a fan, I will be relieved, but not happy. And I think coming into the season, you said to yourself as a fan, I'll be happy if we go to a bowl game. I don't feel happy right now. And I'm not sure why. I need to work with my therapist on why that is. But I'm unhappy, deeply unhappy. But
You've met your deductible at this point. So this is good time to have that conversation. Work it out in the next month and a half. Let us know what you decide.
Graham, I want to move on to someone else that has not made the fan base happy in nearly a half a decade, in Tom Izzo and the MSU Spartans. It was a interesting week. MSU lost to Kansas 66-77 in the Champions Classic. That's number one in the country, Kansas, in a game that was closer, I think, than the score indicates. And then just a few days later, beats Bowling Green 86-72 in a game that there has never been a score that has lied as much as that one. Like that one will do numbers for us later on in the what's the net ratings because of the margin of victory, but that game was close. This team at times is way more encouraging than last year's team. I think we could say the offense is not nearly as stagnant, but at the same time, holy Christ, like who's good on this team? Do you watch practices? Who is good on this team? I'm genuinely asking.
Well, okay. So I think the football, we're talking about this football conversation, right? Where there's, the bar is here and the basketball is, when we're talking who's good, it's here and here.
That's
right?
Tom's fault. The expectation is here for basketball.
Because I actually, and I have to catch myself with some of this, because I really enjoy this basketball team. And part of it is, and this is just, it's the roster turnover. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I didn't like Malik Hall and those guys, but one of my favorite football seasons ever to cover was the 3-9 season. So I come from it from a very different place. And
which one?
The first one. It's not just because I sort of jokingly predicted it. It was because all those guys had been around, Philippe Calhoun, Connor Cook, forever and ever and ever. And it was just like, new storylines, different personalities, different challenges, different type of season. This basketball season has that feel. And so I enjoy watching teams try to figure themselves out and players try to figure themselves out and all of that, sort of the process of it. And I think it's like one of the things that Michigan State does better than any basketball program probably in the country right now. I don't know how many others. There are no others in the Big Ten that have an open locker room. Like after the Champions Classic, Izzo talks. Kansas brings up 2 players, and no Michigan State players come to the press conference because they're all available in the locker room, sitting at their locker. And Jaden Akins, just has an awful game and a game that he had been sort of pointing to, is there just to talk and deal with it. And it does a couple things. One, it's a level of accountability, but it's also becomes a one-day story. Nobody at the next availability is then asking for Jaden Akins, asking him why he stunk it up at the Champions Classic, because we've already asked you that, right? And it's asked and answered. And if you didn't spend the money to go to Atlanta, that's on you. So I'm having fun covering the team from that standpoint of just them trying to figure it out. And I also think they're pretty good. I think they're potentially still everything I thought. Like I still think this could be a team that is in the top, it's an 18-team Big Ten. So when you say top 4 or 5 in the Big Ten, I think it's a team that could be a, 5-seed-ish NCAA tournament team. I still think it's got enough parts to really grow into something that's pretty good. And I say that because, I don't think they played well in certain ways against Kansas. But whatever Kansas is, Kansas is viewed as a contender.
Yeah.
And that's they're in the same realm. And now is relying on Jaden Akins to be a go-to guy going to work? Probably not. I think we've seen that at this point. Do they need him to be an integral piece that is rebounding at a high level and creating and hit, and they need him to start hitting shots? Absolutely. But when I look at, what does Jace Richardson sort of grow into in this season? Cohen Carr is one of my favorite developmental stories to watch because I hated watching him play basketball last year. And it was fun to watch him dunk and all that, but he was so bad in the half court because he was just so lost. And he understands how to, find space, get to the basket on the drive, how to, I spent some time with the Bowling Green staff because I was, doing a separate piece sort of on how they scout Michigan State. And I sent, because Tum Tum was coming back and Todd Simon, their coach, is from Fowler and all that stuff.
And Tum Tum had the scout for this game, as I
absolutely
right.
Jaden Akins,
right.
As he should have.
He's calling out their plays. Like Jaden Akins looked at one point, he's like, God, he's yelling out the plays and everything.
All right,
well,
Graham,
we were
hold on.
told
We
that does not matter. That doesn't impact the game in any meaningful way. So we're moving on.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, great Connor Stallions dig. Love that. But also, can we, Graham, what the fuck? Tum Tum, how long has it been since Tum Tum has been here?
Well, he was a grad assistant for 2 years, like 2 years ago.
Good. That's good. That's
To
fair.
change the plays a little bit.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but he's
Has
not.
Connor Stallions taught us nothing?
Jesus.
No, it's a fair point. But in other words, going back to Cohen Carr, like watching a team.
Oh, sorry. I'll change the banner back.
Sorry. But watching a team prepare for Cohen Carr, like they spend a lot of time on Carr. Like he's somebody that they worry about, and the whole game plan is, take away this space from him. Don't, sag off him here, whatever, all this stuff. And he's figured out how to counter that and be really effective. Yeah. And so I'm curious now. He eventually needs to add an outside shot, and he clearly wants to. And he and Izzo, I asked him this in the locker room on Saturday, and he said, are you able to take that open three? And he said, well, he wouldn't really answer. He said, Coach and I have an understanding of what I should take and what I shouldn't take. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, situation in the game and everything. But that's obviously a step he knows he's got to take. And but watching him grow and sort of become so between him and Jace, and then you see, I still think that Jackson Kohler's outside shot is going to become something that's a weapon at some point this season. Mm-hmm. And it's all I think there's enough there to be a really good team. What'll be interesting to see, though, is you can only play 5. And do you have 5 who are in other words, if you could play 9 guys, there aren't going to be many teams in the country with a better 9 than Michigan State. Like, they have legitimate depth this year. But, you can only play 5, and do their 5, the 5 that they put on the court late in games, are they able to close out against good teams? That's the stuff we really don't know yet. But I'm not worried about them yet at all. I find them interesting. I think we'll find out a lot more in Maui, because they're going to likely get UConn, and then either North Carolina or Iowa State or Auburn. They're going to get 2 really good teams down there, as long as they don't lose the first game to Colorado. So, I'm still – but part of that is I'm just enjoying covering them so much more than I was – the previous group, that it was just sort of the same storyline. So maybe I'm blinded by that. I don't know.
Well, here's the storyline from before. This is back again. Michigan State, currently 359 out of 364 teams in 3-point shooting. That's how last season started. How does this happen 2 times in a row?
Again.
Is there some kind of fealty that needs to be paid to the 3-point shooting gods, that would the check got lost in the mail? What is happening with this team and its 3-point shooting right now?
It's a great question, because what are they, 20 or something, not even that. They're 15 for 80.
It's ungodly.
It's
for
ridiculous.
it. I got you.
No,
They're 16 for
Jonathan
80.
Kim, it is godly.
16 for 80.
Because I think they do have a number of pretty good shooters. I don't know if they have. I think part of the problem is, though, there are certain guys on this planet that you just say, that's a shooter. That's a shooter. And what they are. And they don't have a lot of those guys. They have guys who are capable 3-point shooters, but there is a difference than the guy who walks onto a pickup game or walks into a game that people get really scared of. And so I think that's part of how this happens, because they have the type of lineup where a number of guys have the capability to all be off at once or all going at once. But really, I think it's just, I don't know. I just think it's bad, weird luck mostly. I do. I just don't think it's a bad shooting team. I think they got enough shooting on the roster. I don't think it'll be the story of their season. And obviously, the longer it goes, the longer you wonder about that. But they really do need Akins to start shooting at a decent clip, because he's just on the court so often that's a big part of it. You can't have your 2 guard shooting like that, and unless you're getting a lot. And obviously Fears is not going to be a volume 3-point shooter, and he's on the court a lot. So you need Akins shooting at a better clip than he is, and I think it'll fix itself. I don't know why it's happened. I was over there doing the piece on Akins before the Champions Classic, and he and Fiddler Fiddler and Kurt Tang were running these exhausting drills, coming off screens and shooting, and they were going drill. It was an hour of it. It was. They're working at it, and they were making a ton of them. So it's one of the things I don't really have an answer for.
He was an above 40% shooter as a sophomore, so it's in there. It just needs to come out. Sorry, Jonesy.
I want to turn to Plum here in a second, but the one of the things. So I think Booker played 10 minutes,
13 or 10 minutes, barely anything.
Fears got benched at one point in time in the Bowling Green game. So what's interesting to me, you bring up that MSU has 9 players. Maybe 10, and Izzo has not been shy thus far about using playing time as a cudgel in ways that I don't know that we've quite seen him do over the last few seasons. I think it helps that Jace Richardson has been a goddamn revelation, and is maybe their best player, frankly. But Fiddler, I think, played 18 minutes in the last game, also got benched substantially. I'm curious if this is A, B, or C. Is this Tom Izzo saying, I don't give a fuck anymore, I want to win, and so I'm going to do what I need to do? Is it B, that he has a team that has the depth and personality that can handle it? or is it C, both of those things? Like I haven't seen him. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but I don't think I've seen him be this way before with playing time in the last 4-5 years.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think he's. It's a good question. I think some of it has to do with he's got a lot of guys, none of whom have really earned much yet.
Sure.
And so it's easier to do it with, than when you've got veteran guys.
Like I said, who's good on this team?
Well, that's yeah. And I think, some of it you're trying to manage egos early and give people opportunities. Like he knew early on, like Jackson Kohler was their best 4-man, big man all summer. And he knew that. But he knew Kohler could handle coming off the bench. He's still going to be in the game late as long as things played out the way they have. And it was a way to give Booker a chance, keep him involved, and give him a chance to really make some strides. And it hasn't happened like they wanted to. So you got to win games, and Kohler's just been a much better player at this point. He's been willing to go small. Like my favorite lineups are Kohler at the 5, Carr at the 4, and then so on.
Fun lineup.
Whether you've got Fiddler in there or not, you've got guards. And I don't mind even no Fiddler. I mean, Fiddler does a really good job of getting to the line. I think there's a lot of value in that. They're getting to the line like 7 more times a game right now than they did a year ago or something. But I think what'll be really interesting to watch is when push comes to shove, and is this ultimately his die trying? Is willing to do whatever, right? Is this what he meant? And he's but he said all along, and he's tried to set this up in the idea that these guys were going to decide playing time. Like that was something he's never. I mean, he's said that before, but he's never repeated it as often. I think he was trying to just basically send a message to them through the press to the idea that if you're not out there, it's on you. And but yeah, I'm very curious to see where it goes, because there's some lineups that I think could really give people problems. I think the Carr, Kohler, Regard lineup is potentially Holloman, Akins, Fears, or Richardson. 3 of those 4 with Carr and Kohler is potentially their best group.
I disagree with what you said before, Jonesy. Like, if we learn nothing from the beginning of games where we get out to a 0-9 like deficit or whatever, like Izzo isn't there yet with the lineups, and he's still placating. There's been a lot of positive things said about Cohen Carr so far on this episode. And Plum, I did want to point out to you his free throw shooting against Bowling Green. Is there anything that you wanted to say about that as we closed things out on hoops?
Unless he shot 100%.
He did not. He shot 25%. Do you have any feelings about that?
I have a lot of them. And I texted you guys consistently about this. I mean, this was the whole saga of the game. I do want to just say my favorite part of your column, your quick takes regarding our win against Bowling Green, Graham, was that you referred to Marcus Johnson as, quote, wide-bodied. And that was the most offensive but also generous thing you could have said about him. And I loved it. And I appreciate it.
He's not my first wide-bodied guy to write about. So yeah.
That was great. And I loved it. So no, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about threes. Did you make the Garrick Norman comment?
No, we need to share that. You can't leave that data nugget.
And that's yours, Greg. You're the one that found this per Torvik, who's of course our gospel source for truth.
Yeah.
He's free.
Yeah, Mr. Torvik, if you look at the season thus far, he's got his own little metric called Proporkatau, or whatever, however it's pronounced. But basically, it's how much is someone committed or contributing to winning. Jace Richardson, Jackson Kohler, to a lesser extent, Frankie Fiddler, Jay Nakins,
Cohen Carr?
They're doing okay. They're up in the plus. Our second lowest output, gentlemen, on the season so far, as it contributes to winning in a -1, a deficit, is Mr. Xavier Booker. If there was questions about who the lowest contributor is, it's Garrick Norman, who is not in the rotation. So Nick Sanders is contributing more right now to winning according to the metrics than Xavier Booker is, but there's not much to be said there. Like, it's not working.
Make shots.
Yeah. It's not working out.
Well, my concern for Booker long term, and this is increasingly so, is the fact that he's just not an aggressive personality.
Yeah.
And you have to be that at some level to be successful, especially his position, but in that sport. And, you know, he's put on some weight. He's got some added strength. Like, I don't think it's even – I think there was a point in his career, and maybe when he showed up at Michigan State, where he just didn't have the frame to body people. Like, he spent his life getting pushed around, and so he handles things a certain way. I think, you know, it's okay to lose some of those battles. You just got to go after it. And I've asked Izzo about this before, to see if you ever had somebody who wasn't naturally aggressive later then become aggressive. And he's kind of hemmed and hawed around, because I don't think he has. Like, I think that's the concern. Is like, I do think for him, like, he is a natural shooter. We talk about shooters and other things. Like, Kurt Tang's a natural shooter, and there's some guys who are like, if he could start to feel good about himself because he was hitting some threes, I think it would start to change some things for him. And he actually, I thought, played okay in one spurt against Bowling Green. The thing about that's good for Michigan State with him, and I would have never thought this would be the case, but they really don't need him. And
yeah,
and that's
hot take.
That's sort of where. Well, I mean, this team, if they,
I know your show tomorrow will be like, this team doesn't need Xavier Booker. Hot take.
Yeah, well, no, it's because of Kohler. It's because of Kohler, and it's because Carr can play the 4, and it's because of their guard depth. Like, they can put really good 5s on the court that don't have him. Now, if he had developed into something more than he has to this point, that would help them. That would help their ceiling. But, like, they don't need him to be out there to be a pretty good team. Ultimately, if he's going to be playing 15 minutes a game, he's going to have to be better than he's been, though, because those 15 minutes matter, and they come from somebody else.
I've got one final question for you, Graham. Sorry, on basketball. How did it feel? You know, you asked 2 questions about the 5s in your press conference, because you got your finger on the pulse of the fan base. But how did it feel when, at the end of your first question, Izzo admitted to everyone and maybe to himself that he wished he got a guy like Johnson out of the transfer portal from D2? How, that little nugget at the end, did that pay the whole thing off for you?
Well, yeah, and I love guys like Marcus Johnson. They're just fun. I will say this. I've never seen anybody make Carson Cooper look more like Akeem Olajuwon than Marcus Johnson did guarding him. So, like, I mean,
great example.
There is the other side of it. So you see why he's not, like, it would not go well, him playing for Izzo. I mean, there'd be a lot of fun in that, but defensively it would be I would be an interesting plus minus at the end of games, for sure.
Who asked about timeouts this early in the season, by the way? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. That might have been Wenzel, actually. Might have been Matt Wenzel from M Live. I can't remember. I don't want to attribute to him.
That makes sense. The newish beat. Before we let you go, Graham, we got to do a quick campus roundup. So, Robin Freilich has women's hoops rolling right now. Slightly disappointing week. They didn't hit 100 points in either game, just 95 and 96, I believe, in dominating Wims. Hockey sweeps Notre Dame. Women's soccer notches a first-round victory over Western Michigan University. I know, near and dear to your heart. Best ticket in town for your $1. What sport is it?
It's women's basketball.
Hashtag ally. I'm going to go ahead and change your...
That's the blue sky in you, the virtue signal.
I couldn't say that until this week, but no.
They're fun. They press, they run, they shoot fast. Like, they're fun.
Effectively. Yeah, it's great.
I really like her mind is a basketball mind too. Like I am very curious to see where that program goes.
Yeah.
And obviously getting a really top level transfer from Oregon is one good sign that the talent acquisition is not going to be an issue at this level too. Because you always wonder that. I mean, obviously she recruited to get the kid she did at Ashland to win to go like 103. You have to recruit at the top level of that, and she was doing a good job at Bowling Green. But like that's the one thing you wonder. But the style of play is fun. The players seem to have a lot of fun playing for her, and so I think it'll be a place that people want to go. I mean, she's a little quirky. I've known her forever. Like she grew up at the same church as I grew up at St. Paul's in downtown Lansing. So I've known her since fellowship choir nights in Wednesday nights in 1988. I've known her forever. But yeah, like I like the way they play a lot. I mean, women's soccer for me. So I can check this. I have a free ticket because it's a press pass, and because I can stand on the field level, that is like seeing the game played at that level is a lot of that close up is a lot of fun for me. Like they have made me much worse in my rec league soccer because I go back then to rec league soccer and try things that I've just witnessed, which ultimately wound up being turnovers and result in goals going the other way. But there's a lot of good stuff, really. I mean,
can I ask, just because I can't find clips of it, what was the red card for in the 49th minute?
Oh, it's a good question. It was it didn't look that severe to me. Like I think it would, and I didn't even see I didn't see the actual play, and I was right there too. I didn't see the actual. I saw all of a sudden, the card come out, but I don't know.
But it was some sort of foul. It wasn't
a foul.
It wasn't a penalty. It didn't result in a penalty kick or anything like that.
It was out. Yeah, no, because it was outside of the box. It wasn't that far outside of the box, but it was outside of the box. It must have been just
studs or something.
High tackle or coming in with studs up or something. I don't know. It's a good question.
I know Alex Gillo, the referee, and he doesn't usually go for the red card, so that was surprising.
Yeah, why don't you
text him then? Text him now.
Come on,
no, I'm not. Graham was here.
Scoop opportunity. Come on, man.
I should have known. I was trying to actually tweet out a video on Blue Sky at the time, and I sort of missed what was happening in that moment, and I was trying to play catch up, and all of a sudden they were videoing and reviewing it, but it wasn't clear. They said that the red card stood. I didn't see the initial red card. Like he came back out with the red card, so I'm not sure. I'm not. I
must have given a yellow then, because he wouldn't have re-shown the red if it had just stood.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't see it as being that severe, but that was.
It sounds like such a dog and pony show.
That's why he loves being a ref so much. He's the center of attention. He gets to show the card.
It sort of draws on a German heritage, but with all the formality. There's a real hand in the air.
Western was higher in the RPI than Michigan State. Like that was a bad. Western got kind of screwed with that matchup.
Yeah.
And I could tell it's one of those games right away. You start watching it and you go, "Oh, this could get interesting." And Western had two moments where they kind of got sloppy a little bit. Michigan State took advantage, and that was that really. And then the red card, it's impossible to. It's hard to come back,
but, very hard. Yeah.
But I would say women's basketball is if I had one thing to go bang for your buck right now, hockey's still a pretty inexpensive ticket, but it's just hard to get for people.
Yeah.
So that's
well, Graham, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Graham Couch of the Lansing State Journal. If you're not subscribed, find one of the $1 subscriptions. That's what we do. And then just share it amongst your friends. That's the corporate line. Perfect. Nailed it.
Perfect.
Like your cable password.
I've given other advice that's got me in lots of trouble. The year that I tweeted out to people, there was like a really good offer, and then it was but lots of people already had subscriptions that wanted that offer. It's like $2 for 2 years, some ridiculous offer that probably didn't wind up paying dividends for the company. But my advice was like, just lock this in with another email and then cancel your other one.
Yeah.
But I tweeted it out, and my boss got a hold of me really quickly. It was not a good conversation. So that is not
Definitely
my
don't
total
just
list.
add or take away a period from your email. That doesn't work. Don't do that. But anyway, of course, you can catch him on Couch in the Rube on wherever you get podcasts and YouTube now, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to watch our ugly asses, sure. Yeah.
But you can see the charger fall out. Is that a thing?
I've got a new charger, but yeah, you can see us. Yeah, it's I fixed
You lost
the
a
issue.
bit, Graham. You lost a bit. Anyway, Graham Couch, subscribe to his work, check out his podcast, and of course, Graham, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you again to Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal and Couch of the Rube for joining us. Before we move on, gentlemen, we gotta say a kind word about our dear friends on the Jackson-Washtenaw County line, Mama's Mercantile and Eater. Don't
What a
laugh
lead
at
up.
me.
That's great. That was a great lead up.
It's near Jackson. It's near Washtenaw County.
Close enough.
That's what you need to know. Mama's Mercantile and Eatery at mamas.merc on Instagram. Check them out. They're great. And hey, look, we got 2 home games, and you might be saying to yourself, it's cold. You're right. It is going to be cold. But you know what? They got the sound on for the MSU games, and you can get a Go Green Olive Burger in addition to their great burger menu, generally speaking. So, check it out. Half pound, locally raised beef, cheddar cheese, house-made olive sauce. You know the deal. I've told you about this. They got the buffalo chicken dip, which is great. The hand beer battered onion rings. And most importantly of all, if Greg hasn't consumed them all, because let's be honest, if he can get a butt heavy in his hands, he will do it. You got the $3 domestic bottles. Check Mama's Mercantile and Eatery out. And hey, you're at the game on Saturday? NBD. Sober up Sunday morning and then travel back to check the Lions out on Sunday. You can get the Honolulu Burger. It's also excellent. And same specials on Sundays. Check them out. Mama's Mercantile and Eatery. And if you mention Can't Read, Can't Write, you get 10% off of your bill.
Which, by the way, I think we've been making a huge mistake.
Oh,
We've been talking about how great a value the $3 domestics are, but we've neglected to point out that with Can't Read, Can't Write, those become $2.70 domestics. And let me ask you this, listener, when's the last time you had a $2.70 beer at a fine drinking establishment? You owe it to yourself to go to Mama's Mercantile. And then just remember, Can't Read, Can't Write sent you $2.70. You fools.
Kevin, can I one up this?
Mm-hmm.
You're on your way to Mama's Mercantile and Eatery,
Mm-hmm.
and your cars start sputtering because maybe you live with someone who likes to live on the edge and doesn't ever fill up their gas tank until the very last second.
Can't relate.
And you roll into a gas station, and it's $3 or it's $2.70. What do you feel better about? How differently does $2.70 hit than $3?
Well, my understanding from the election is that gas is actually $15 per
Yes.
gallon.
Yeah. Well, not anymore.
so-
Now the election happened. It's
Oh,
gone
correct.
way
Now we're
down.
back to $3. Yeah. $2.70 feels great. We love $2.70. Also for eggs. Eggs.
Always wanted to spend $1 on eggs. $1 for dozens of eggs.
All right. Well, for everyone who's still listening to us, and I assume JD Vance has tapped out after that segment with Couch, let's get into it. Post clarity is hitting hard. We want to head off Grand River for just a second. Gentlemen, we have a conversation we need to have.
What's that?
Well, so
Are we
in
having
the
a family meeting live on the air right now?
We are. In the last 3 days, Blue Sky has added 3 million users, bringing their total up to, I believe, 19 million active users. We are at Spartan we're at Spartan_pod on Twitter, but we are at Spartan Pod, which we really wanted when we joined Twitter, but it was not available. But we're that on Blue Sky. It's a better platform. It's truer to what Twitter used to be, and has better values. I think we could have a an open conversation about whether we want to leave Twitter. And we recognize we have a lot of followers on Twitter. I guess I don't know if I'm quite ready to leave yet.
What value does Twitter itself give you?
What
Today.
value does it get? Does it give the pod?
Okay, fine.
In theory, pretty decent exposure. Though I'll note that we used to get way more views on when we tweeted the episodes out, and those have decreased exponentially.
I presume that's because we lack the blue check mark, and so we're not getting the push.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking a factor of, we got thousands of views on an episode tweet, and now we're at 400 views. So a pretty substantial shift. And obviously Elon Musk is a piece of shit. Though I do love the RFK hazing that happened. Did you guys see the picture of that?
No.
Oh,
The McDonald's. Yes, I did.
yeah, they made him eat McDonald's and drink a Coke. And that was pretty delightful. But the, I'll say this. I'm going to try and do my best to post a bit more and provide a bit more content on our Blue Sky page because,
Okay.
but listener, I think unless you guys want to fully unplug from Twitter today for the podcast, but I'm kind of leaning towards that's where we're heading. Probably within a matter of weeks. So I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on this?
I mean, obviously we want people to listen, but if we really wanted people to listen, we would do different things while recording.
We would be better. We would
Yes.
just be better.
We'd pay for Ken Palm, for instance.
Yeah. So, like, truly in the scope of things, how much life, I don't think will change all that significantly for me if we jump from Twitter to Blue Sky. So I'm happy to do it if you guys are up for it.
All right. Well, that'll be our Christmas gift to ourselves then. So, dear listener, if you want to participate with the show, continue to participate in Twitter questions. You've got 6 weeks to make a migration over to Blue Sky. You can, of course, email us at can'treadcan'twrite1855@gmail.com. I noticed we lost now 80 followers on Twitter. So, like, there's plenty of people who are wholly unplugging from Twitter. And so we'd encourage you to move platforms. There's a lot of MSU folks over there, and the conversations during the game were spirited and lively. Again, it is a better platform from a who are you valuing and respecting, and what do you want out of your social media platform. But we're at Spartan Pod. God, I've gotten used to saying underscore. So let's do that then. And of course, if you don't want to make a new social media platform, you can email us again at can'treadcan'twrite1855@gmail.com. And with that, let's do these Twitter questions, shall we?
Shall we? Let us.
All right. First up, listener Mike Jones. We did not, because Greg is holed up in a basement somewhere, wondering if he should trust his medical providers. We did not do listener Mike Jones liquors, but I'm going to plug again. I've plugged often. The Sun Beach Cinnamon Whiskey is fantastic, and I have a packed day at work tomorrow. And you know what? Drinking this much cinnamon whiskey, not a great idea. But with this, you don't get that syrup nasty headache in the morning. So cheers, gentlemen. It's an antidote to hangovers.
Wow.
It's itself an antidote to it is both the cause and the solution to all hangovers. Excellent. Very good. First question from the listener Mike Jones: is playing this upcoming Friday night a hidden benefit to get shit done the Saturday before Thanksgiving? Who am I kidding? I'll just be able to enjoy a Saturday football without the lack of a passing rush ruining it. Coach Smith talked about this a number of times. as if to set expectations in his press conference that it's a short week. But Graham called out that Purdue is truly awful. So what do you guys think about this? Playing, everyone, not everyone. A lot of teams have to play a Friday night. All told, is this a pretty good one in the scope of things?
Yeah. I think
I'll
so.
say this as it relates to the schedule. It has worked out well for me as a parent. Honestly, I've not had to miss a game, and this Friday night is hitting right. Noon Saturday, don't want that nonsense. So
neither does Ohio State fandom. So you're in good company. And next from LMJ, why'd the football team have to ruin such a perfect Saturday? Women's soccer, check. Hockey, check. Basketball, half check.
Half check.
It did feel like a half check, didn't
It was a real half check.
Or a quarter check.
Yeah. Not great.
Can we also celebrate Graham for a second from having us go fully into just shitting on players incessantly? Because I had some thoughts this week. But well said, Mike Jones, I guess. Yeah. But whatever. Next up, Jamrine. Why
You did find
so many injuries all the time?
Found my burner. And I'm sorry. I should have had a better hidden question. It's a great question. There's no answer to it. And I wasn't even going to waste my time asking Graham it today because it's just more of me angrily yelling at Cloud for no reason. So it doesn't make sense other than the pipes. And all of us who have lived on campus know what the water tastes like in the dorms. Mm-hmm. It leaches calcium from bones. It is intended to hurt players and to set them up for years of debilitating illness and disability, which begins in their...
I was assured by Susie Merchant that it was menstruation that did that, but that she said that.
Check your notes, everyone. Google it.
God.
Google it. Definitely Google it.
She said it. But I'll just say this, Jamrine. The reason MSU sucked at Illinois has nothing to do with the place that was decimated by injuries. That was the secondary, and my God, if you get a fucking sack, maybe things change. Just saying. Next up from Jamrine, why across 3 head coaches and more assistants can we not build an O-line? I wanted to get into this with Graham. Do either of you have a thought? Because it's been bad for a decade? A little less than a decade. I think
Graham basically touched on it, though. Like, you've got to grow one yourself. It's hard to go get one from somewhere, especially for a program like MSU in the state of a program like MSU. And let's be honest, a lot of the guys that were evaluated and brought in, even high level, the number of 4-star offensive linemen that MSU has had over the last 10 years that did not work out is unbelievable. So it's tough. There is no silver bullet here, and I'm a little bit more pessimistic than Graham is. It doesn't seem likely that this is going to change in the near future to me. Bum, do you feel differently?
No, that's we don't have any. We've got no one. We have no depth. I think in his column he mentioned 3 guys with some tenure, but I don't think any of them are starting, or they might be starting now because of the injuries. So this is homegrown, and we're not seeing staffing with the real capacity to coach it. And the problem is it's depriving Aiden Childs of the confidence that he needs. And so it's going to become a self-fulfilling doom prophecy, I think.
I've got to speak directly to some of our listeners for a moment here. I got some flack earlier in the year when I asked out loud, why is Aiden Childs not playing the end of some of these blowouts against the second team on the other side? Your Ohio State's is Oregon's.
There it is.
And the pushback was like, injuries can happen at any time. What, you don't care about injuries? And particularly with like Oregon, he had barely taken like 25 snaps at that point before he got pulled.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice at the end of this Illinois game when things were out of reach mathematically, he was still in there getting those snaps? Interesting to me. Seems like that could have happened earlier in the season as well. But I'm just a bitter man. And so is Joe Ashworth, perhaps. Is it possible, Jonesy, that the reason we can't have nice things as a fan base is because our expectations and patience are externally misaligned?
Ooh.
Football team was a rebuild. That hasn't changed. People should chill just like 10%.
I'm going to need the next question from Joe as well. But Joe, I think this is you're attributing a lot of agency to the fan base that I think is insane. You act as if our negativity or positivity has anything fucking to do with what the team does on the field.
There it is.
What? Like, and by the by, in an age where your quarterback is making over $1 million a year,
Allegedly,
I don't give a shit what I say about him. Like, truly, this idea that the team is influenced by what people tweet, then if you are that easily influenced, you are not worth the paper your money is printed on. Like, I don't know. I can't with this idea that somehow the problem is the fan base and that we've cursed ourselves because we want to win a natty. Like, and you see Sig doing it. We didn't even talk about Sig getting a check written for himself.
Do we have those numbers? I still haven't seen those numbers. Do you have them?
No, I mean,
other than there's an extension.
Well, the Yahoo article did get updated with some, but seemingly Indiana is so new to this that they didn't include a buyout, which is hilarious.
Hysterical that he
if true,
yeah. Well,
if true,
well, that or it could be Coach Sig has a pretty good manager and is like, we'd like to generate a lot of headlines, but have no downside. In Indiana, we've already got your balls in the vice. So maybe you make it worth our while and we don't twist it, but we're going to twist it, by the way. I'll throw you the next Joe Ashworth question, Jonesy. Tum Tum looked pretty fiery and competitive on the sideline, eh?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did.
Joe, the things I said about Tum Tum and what I wanted him to feel after the Illinois game, but before the Bowling Green game, would make anybody blush. Mm-hmm. Let's just say I wanted him to question his faith. Invert the infamous quote, if you will. But Tom looked into it. Like, I don't know. He looked the most Izzo clone that there was on the court. I'll give credit where credit's due. And if he was calling out every play against his alma mater, then my God, I love that cutthroat attitude. Like, I do. But he's 8 steps away from being eligible to be Michigan State's head coach. Like, he's an assistant at Bowling Green. Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah, it's going to take some time. Next up from Thomas to Plum. No clue how basketball practice works, but why can't Izzo just have the guys only shoot threes all day until they start making them? And then parenthetically, or at least ask Coach Freilich how to improve their shooting form.
So we've talked a lot about the old toaster thing, but it's true. I mean, he needs to absolutely just have them just shooting free throws, shooting threes. And he is literally and just taking drives with a golf club and just driving golf balls at their heads, whatever it is. And the thing is, injuries are going to happen. And if this is how they happen, fine. because whatever it is, they need to be like, oh God, is he going to hit me with a golf ball? Just, you got to be distracted. If you can survive not getting hit by a golf ball or making the three while getting hit in the back of the head with a golf ball, then that's what we are expecting in terms of consistency to build your performance so that you can shoot more reliably in high pressure game situations. Throw a toaster, drive over their foot with a golf cart, whatever is required. It is designed, it's intended to build resiliency. And Tom, I think, continues to get soft in this regard. I don't know what he's doing in practice. It certainly isn't the essentials. And this is ultimately on the players. The last thing I'll say is this shouldn't even be what practice time is for. They should each have 4 hours a day in the gym by themselves, no music, maybe no light, just fucking shooting. Shoot like your life depends on it. All of you horses' asses. Jaden Akins, chief among them. The least reliable shooter we have.
Real Happy Gilmore situation with the fast pitch.
Fully.
Speaking of Jaden Akins, there's only so much that you can ask Graham while he's here, but I did want to call out that quote that he took by going to Atlanta from Jaden Akins. Quote, "It's definitely tough," and then losing to the Jayhawks is what we're talking about here. They're supposed to be the number one team in the country, and we didn't play great, but we were right there. That shows that we've got a pretty good team and room for improvement. Is that a loser's mentality a little bit?
Yeah, but
as if Kansas wasn't missing wide open bunnies.
Right. It's just it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit like kind of it's a win. It's got elements. We're kind of feeling good with this loss right now, which I think that MSU has had some senior players that would be like, it is the expectation of this program to win that game, and it's not acceptable that we did not. And I know that Graham talked about how we're seeing a changing of the guard. I'm ready to sort of like finish that process.
Yeah.
And that's why, even though we haven't talked about this, AJ Hogarth's putting up big numbers down at Vanderbilt. I could not care less. Yeah. Next from Thomas, would you trust a study making sweeping conclusions with only 10 data points? I guess that's talking about the football season. The thing is that you're only counting the game as a data point, but there's like a
trillion data points.
There's a trillion data points within a game.
But Thomas, also, there's only 12 data points that matter.
Yeah. Like maximum is how many college football playoff games can we have now? Is it maximum is 16 data points, but most teams are only going to have 12 or 13. So like,
I just, and the thing is that each one becomes more consequential or frankly, maybe less consequential. There's actually a pretty standardized curve on this depending on when your losses hit, right? Like, it'd actually be an interesting curve to build out, but whatever. No, Thomas. If the question is about whether Smith is successful as a coach, which maybe that's the question, right? Is Smith good as a coach with only 10 data points? You're missing the 11th, I think, which is that the recruiting class sucks.
Yeah.
Out loud.
All right. Next up from Mizza. Why is the coaching staff so incompetent?
Which
both. Why choose one?
Well, speaking of things that we didn't get a chance to ask Graham, in Smith's press conference, he was asked what happened at the end of the half. And he was kind of like, we have cards, and the card said, don't call a timeout. So we didn't call a timeout. And I was like, what? Excuse me? What? I don't understand that. That it is worth listening to his press conferences. Like, you do get actual information from them. And this was the thing where I was like, There's no like second guessing the card or just looking at the situation. There's something about coaching right now where clock management at the end of halves and games in both football and basketball is just atrocious. We talked about this during the NCAA tournament last year. The number of games that I watched where coaches just fumbled all over themselves at the end of close games. I don't understand it. And I think it's, well, it's because they point at the analytics and it's like, well, no.
Greg, can we be pretty specific on, because I actually, in that moment, had to step away for a second. So Illinois gets the ball with what, like 50-ish seconds left in the game?
And MSU has 3 timeouts.
Yeah. And uses none of them.
0.
And so it's 3rd and 3. And I believe Illinois had just thrown an incomplete pass, which, by the by, like, you want to call out bad
clock. Yeah.
But like, let's call it bad clock management. Illinois, I don't know what the fuck they were doing.
Well, my favorite bad clock management of all time is us beating Wisconsin because Brett Bielema called a timeout to ice our field goal kicker as we had no timeouts and he was running out on the field. And he called a timeout to ice him, but really he just gave us time to set it up and then he hit it. And were you at that game, Plum?
No.
You would have been in Micronesia for that game.
Yep.
But like, as soon as he called that timeout, they showed him on the Jumbotron and he was like, oh, no, that was the wrong move. And the place erupted because it was like, we're going to win this game because you're an idiot. Anyway, so this isn't a new thing. Continue.
Yeah, so Bert's an idiot. It doesn't matter. But MSU, it's 3rd and 3, and I believe there were like 24 seconds left on the clock. And then the decision was to not call a timeout.
So time's just running. Time that we could have used and had timeouts. And it's just running.
Because it was 3rd and 3 and not 3rd and 4.
They have an algorithm, Michael. It's an algorithm that they have. So why don't you
and
just
so I guess
them?
the nicest way I could say this is that feels very Mark Zuckerberg.
We did this because it was 3rd and 3 and not 3rd and 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's data and we follow the data. It's the 11th point of Thomas's 10.
Data driven. Right. Next up from MZA, Plum. Also, can we hit a fucking 3?
Asked and answered. Listen, join the party. I know. If we all could just order a toaster on Amazon and have it shipped to the Mark D'Antonio basketball building, it would be highly appreciated.
Honestly, though, it's in the way that fans like do things to not cancel a show.
Seriously.
Let's all ship a toaster.
All ship a toaster. Like, what the fuck is this? And then I'll call Tom and tell him. So
next up, Moff asks if they win the next 2 games and then the bowl game is all forgiven and is optimism back, or can they lose one of the next 2 and there's a world in which you're still optimistic? Either of you.
No, nothing is forgiven. I mean, yeah, we should absolutely beat Purdue and Rutgers. We should then get to the blind child bowl of pilgrims and wheat toast and play the University of Northern South Dakota at Hoople. And yes, we will win that game. And again, nothing will have been gained in any of this, except that we'll all still feel the same way we do. We still don't have an O-line. We still have no prospects for said O-line. We will have a 19-year-old quarterback with the utter lack of maybe marginally less lack of confidence. It's money. It's money. It's resources. It's a lot of things. It's just fucking time. So it's not a question of optimism or not optimism. It's like, it's pluck. It's patience. It's the resolve to stick with the program. That's it. We're not going anywhere. I'm still going to be irritated by the whole fucking thing. But if we don't beat Purdue and Rutgers and then we don't get to go beat Hoople, then the toaster goes to Jonathan fucking Smith.
Kim.
Kim. Well, all of them get a toaster.
Greg, before we move on, because Plum brings this up, and I think it's important. Do you want to share the thought that we had about bowl practices? Because I think that's what we're all fretting about, is that like the bowl game doesn't matter.
Right.
At all.
It's the practices and how fucking stupid this rule is.
Of all the anachronisms, like it comes from a time of like, this is a special thing for the team and the guys get to go on vacation. Now in the expanded playoff, it's more true than ever. Those are the only games that matter. All of the other games are memes or worse, like entirely irrelevant. So why are we trying to take away those extra practices from the teams that obviously need them the most? Like, this is a rule that needs to go away, and you just get that time. These guys are not student athletes anymore. I guess if the program wants to turn down those practices, they should be allowed to, like turning down. We've never seen this, but my understanding is that in the NIT, occasionally programs will decline the invitation. I think I read about that.
What's the NIT?
It's I think it's some kind of like backyard basketball thing that happens in March.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
We're not winning national championships, but we never had to deal with that. Which some people apparently are willing to make that trade-off. Which, by the way, maybe one reason, going back to our family discussion, to not leave Twitter is to keep our finger on the pulse a little bit, and also to get new questioners like Mac, What, and Moff here. Like, have we had them before?
Yeah, I think we've had Moff before, maybe.
Moff, I don't know about, but Mac, I believe we've had before.
Okay, well, welcome back.
But anyway, yeah, love that a 6-6 team gets to practice, but a 5-17 academics is too important to sacrifice that time. Fuck you, NCAA. Next up, Mac, what is it bad to not have a sack in 6 straight games?
Yes, it's historically bad. It's never been worse, in fact.
Actually, do we have to go back pre-2005 now, right? Yes. So we need to know what the next year is. We might be in the 80s at this point in time.
It's literally insane.
So it's not never been done, but it's historically bad. Next up from Jason Fry, Plum still is a guest. I don't think he's very special either. IMO. Jonesy, I didn't look at this.
It's because I said there might be a guest on the podcast, which was Graham, obviously. Jason, you misread the room, you idiot.
But also,
a listener guest.
What's our description on Blue Sky? Did you
update it? Yeah, or did you just copy it and paste?
You just moved it over from Twitter.
I fully because I knew Plum wasn't going to check.
I have to go look.
No, don't, because you're only looking now. You would never looked before.
So true, though. Do I even follow us? I do.
You only give the breadcrumb.
It does
of
say
updating.
two guys
one podcast.
Remember when we gave the breadcrumb of updating the picture, and Plum
it
didn't
took
notice
to realize. We had to tell him that it was there.
Plum did this.
Listen, you get listener guest energy. That's what you get, and that's apparently what people like. So I don't. Who
if I changed it to 3 guys, 1 podcast, what do I get?
Nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
You lose the joke at that point.
At that point, yeah, you've caved. You've given them to the media mob.
Yep. Nate C in with 4 questions because apparently if he missed last week, he gets to double it.
Oh, it's worse than that. Nate C in with paragraphs. Nate, I'm going to let Greg read this, but I want to be clear. We love you, but not again.
Sorry for the absence last week. I was deep in the bereavement process. Is that a joke or are we?
I believe it was about 2 Tuesdays ago, which it's panned out as expected.
Yes, we've all experienced that. Okay, I'm just going to read the next one. Well, what a great sports weekend for those who have already transitioned to the sports that deserve our attention and respect. We got a dub from the ladies in soccer. Check. Men's basketball team didn't lose, except for they also did lose. But I guess this is the weekend specifically. I realize we want more out of them, but with Tum Tum helping coach the other team, maybe it's a good sign the next generation of MSU coaches.
Keep reading.
Okay. More importantly, though, the men swept Notre Dame in hockey! Exclamation point. By and large, really good weekend. So it's about time the year we ask, how many more national championships could we have in other sports if we didn't pay so much in football? Okay. I'm not going to read the rest of the paragraph. Sorry,
All right.
Nate. But that's a question, because I think it's been implied in the media a few times that there are schools, because of the changing landscape, that should give up on football and focus on other sports. Do you, and I don't know that MSU's ever been called out as one of those, because I'm not going to lead the witness on that. Do you guys think that there's anything to that?
Well, Nate says, Nate does some work here.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, so let's stop the charade, throw the football team to the wolves, and except misspell Nate. Come on. You can't read, can't write, but like, come on, do better. And invest in other sports. We could have dynasties. And before we say, but Nate, people only really watch football, I'd like you to go look at Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, and UConn's football teams and then ask, why the hell do I know these schools exist? My point exactly. So here's to a new era. It's an interesting point that Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, and UConn have, historically speaking, doo-doo caca football teams.
Mm-hmm.
We should have maybe brought this up with Graham, but I'm sure Graham would say what I'm about ready to say. Nate, we're not lacking for fucking money in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not. And you know what money doesn't solve? Basketball. See Indiana, which has been horseshit.
Horsed.
Like money isn't the answer. It's a part of the equation for sure.
Yeah,
but Michigan State has enough of it. Like it's not. This isn't it.
I would also point out UConn, set them aside, but Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, they all try to win at football. Unsuccessfully, but they do try. They put forth an effort, and there's a reason that they do that.
Yeah. So Nate, so happy you're back, and I go white. By the way, he says go green, but rejected. Next up, Beth Amaro, Plum. Who gets your vote for the most useless and overpaid person in the football universe? Hers goes to Mike Pereira, hands down. Can we start a petition to replace him with Plum? I think viewership would skyrocket. Also, the fawning over his attire as the best dressed. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I mean, that is literally his whole job, so I'm glad that he's best dressed.
But Plum, this is for you.
It's going to be another Mike, though. It's Mike Tirico. I can't stand him. I can't stand his voice. I can't stand how like newsy he is when he's calling games. I know that's stupid, and I know it's just Lions games because I don't think he's ever on the call for college games. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
But Gus Johnson or Joel Klatt would also.
Joel Klatt's worse than Gus Johnson.
Did you see the fight that is sort of brewed up on the internet with Joel Klatt about Big Noon?
Oh, because Ohio State doesn't want Big Noon. He's like, Big Noon is good for TV.
Or Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, but you've had Ohio State 6 games. Like they did with Michigan last year. Of course your ratings are good.
Yep.
You picked Ohio State and Michigan. Like this isn't complicated.
Yeah, this is easy. Yeah, it's just stupid. Just do that.
Mike Tirico.
That's money. That's money.
You've printed money is what you've done.
Yeah. Mike Tirico, by the way. Barton Hill's own Mike Tirico.
I don't like that. But Beth, I like you. Great question, Beth.
And also a reminder, if you're going to be a sex pest, get it out of the way early. Get that thing early done, and then you can have a career afterwards.
That's
so good for, let's not forget
everybody.
Next up from Munfield Keg Jonesy, I get football can be up and down, can be an up and down thing, but basketball and NIL can be a game changer. Can't Ishbia, St. Andre, etc. filter funds and nab us 2 to 3 high-level recruits or portal people every year? I'm okay with football being a roller coaster, but shouldn't we be competing in basketball? I think Ishbia has been politely asked to stop participating in NIL now that he is a
I don't think he
owner.
has though. I think
Maybe
Unfiltered,
United Wholesale Mortgage stopped being so public about it,
Yeah.
but he's still involved.
Yeah, but either way, the roster's not being paid. Like I just they're getting compensated.
And we've talked about this before. On paper, we're getting some of the best recruits of all time. Occasionally, I see people complaining about Tom Izzo recruiting, and it's like, guys, do you remember Javon Bess? Like, do you remember some of these years? Like, they're not all the Bridges year, okay? Most years were bad, and this is on paper some of the best talent that we've ever had.
Yeah, and lowly 4-star Jace Richardson ends up being a stud. Like, but my complaints about Tom Izzo is that he hasn't recruited a center since he picked up Carson Cooper,
who he got on the rebound.
2-star Carson Cooper. But anyway,
literally
now
he was
Junior
driving through Jackson, and Carson Cooper was just walking on the side of the road, and he opened the door and was like, "Get in."
On 127, left the Motel 6 that was just near the corner of the 94 120. Like, holy shit.
Okay,
anyway,
Michael, that corridor has been developed since you were here last. So
yeah, I've driven by it, and it's quite fancy, but the Motel 6 is still there. Anyway, the point being, like, there's reasons to complain about Tom Izzo's recruiting, and you might fairly ask, can he compete at the top? Because, like, if you should be trying to achieve Duke levels of recruiting, and he's not, but it's not bad recruiting. And either way, all the NIL money in the world is not going to make Tom Izzo change his opinion about the transfer portal. Like, right. I just think
he has to be stopped. He has to retire now. Now is
the
time
so
for him to be retired.
Munfield Keg, I appreciate the question. I just don't think that's actually the question. So anyway, next up is G Money Stew. Plum, is it time to start going behind the green wall where hockey always leads?
It could be, but none of us know enough about hockey, and we don't know anyone who knows anything about hockey. It would be terrible for us to. I mean, we may try. I'll say this:
maybe we'll make some friends this year.
Maybe, but even if we couldn't and we knew nothing and tried in no way to learn anything about hockey, we would still do a better job at that than any of the football team is doing at playing football, for which they're being handsomely compensated. So there's that.
On the discussion of recruiting, the hockey team is going on the road to play the U.S. development team this week on Thursday.
Yep.
And you know that's to drum up interest and stay top of mind with those guys. Yeah,
100%. All right, next up from G Money Stew for Kevin Grack. I am still confused by this football season. I think I'm validated by being disappointed. But before this season, I predicted most of our losses to be losses. I just don't think we're that bad. Thoughts?
G Money Stew, I think,
we talked about this earlier.
I think, we kind of covered this. When you're in the thick of it, it's particularly bad. Like, there's one thing to have it happen like on a piece of paper in front of you of like, oh yes, win, oh yes, loss. But then to experience those losses are demoralizing. I think, and Jonesy was getting to this point earlier, what's so frustrating is that you can see how at least a few of those close games should have been wins, but they weren't for very frustrating reasons. You got your Boston Colleges, you got your Michigans. It's and then you're held up a mirror. And we haven't spoke frankly about this, but Indiana winning 4 of the last 5 does a little prod at the insecurities of the fan base of where we should be in the pecking order.
Yeah.
And that is also difficult to stare down when it's actually happening. But I'm with you. But you're talking about things. You're talking about a very, very emotional thing in a very, very rational way. And there's no place for that here. So be gone with you, G Money Stew. We're just kidding. Stick with us. Move to Blue Sky.
Next up is Beppe Plum. Gentleman, he says, I'm back. Happy bye week. I have a student that is allergic to mustard, and every time she annoys me, I throw a mustard packet at her face. I found that her parents told us 11 years ago because she didn't like it, and I don't like her now. She is a 2:30 football game on Big Ten Network. Now you know.
Now you know.
All right.
Great. Next up, praise of the week: Dollar Tree balloons. They last for 5 months. That's June 1st to 11 1st. And with picture proof, I don't like it. I bet there's ionized radiation attacking my gonads to mutate my offspring into horses. Joke's on you. Vasectomy and menopause ended my lineage. I have questions about how you can experience both of those things.
Well, don't. Next up, Momopoly for Kevin. How soon is too soon to send an offer to the class of 2027 and address it to Amari Irvin?
I think that goes through, this is, listeners, if you have a life and you don't know about this is Sad Irvin's son, right? Whose older brother is at Stanford, if memory serves.
Why are we not taking a second to ask, is Momopoly that plugged into the message boards of 24/7 to know?
Apparently.
Yeah, no, I got questions on this one.
Go look at the burners over there. See if there's anything that injects U's where they don't belong.
There it is.
Tip our hat
Yeah.
to who Momopoly
It's Canadian bacon 24/7/69. That
I mean,
is.
I didn't follow his brother's recruiting that closely, so I don't know how that all worked.
We were in on him.
I have to
and he
imagine
passed.
Amari is aware of us, and will be getting an offer if one is deserved. Whether he'll accept it is an entirely different thing.
Next up from Momopoly, Kevin.
Yeah.
What variety of Christmas ales would you like me to bring to the Can't Read, Can't Write tailgate this year? Kevin, how many years old and at what discount do they need to be?
Listen, mark them all the way down and buy them all out. Because a Christmas ale is to be cherished and should be drank out of season, ideally. I do have a Great Lakes right here, and it's been nice, but I prefer a deeply discounted April Christmas ale for myself. So
Really
next up,
appreciate
Mr. Neurotic Pants asks, if Alex Plum had to give the post-game speech to this team after the loss to Illinois, what would it be and who would it be primarily directed at?
It would
If
be
the
directed
listener guest isn't present, please feel free to imitate him. He told me it's okay.
It would be in the mirror. I would have all my coaches around me, and I'd be yelling at all of them in the mirror, including myself, for our own ineptitude, our ineptitude at recruiting, our ineptitude at coaching and developing player talent and capacity in each position group. I wouldn't single out a single player. This was a full-on fucking team loss, and it was aggravated by more boneheaded bullshit on the coaching staff. And this is where the chickens are coming home to roost. So,
all right, we need to get out of here in less than 7 minutes. So next up, Grooch, do you have an amateur dermatology kit that allows you to perform minor surgeries in your garage? Do you remove abnormalities and then eat them?
Yeah, Mr. Neurotic Pants, I'm really glad that you brought this up, and I'm interested to know what tipped you to this, because all of these things are true. So reach out.
Next up, if MSU's basketball and football teams keep screwing it up, do you want to change this into a Red State-oriented pro wrestling podcast? He says, I can help. Yes, that's what we want.
put it on the table. It's on the table.
UFC, baby. UFC's the spot. That's where we're going.
We will be the Tyson to you being Jake Paul. Next
and my
up,
God, our technology streaming capability couldn't possibly be worse than what Netflix's was on Saturday night. So
it's true. We actually had fewer technical difficulties.
I watched it. I was with neighbors I was it was Friday night, wasn't it? And I was very drunk.
Why did you take
Next
the time
up,
to
Upper
watch
Deck
it?
Jerk Guy. We can get into it later.
Why?
What should be the realistic expectations for the next 2 football games? Winning.
Yeah,
Winning.
wins.
Winning
Wins
is
wins
winning.
are the realistic
Winning is the only
expectations.
answer.
There's
Only win.
Yeah. Next up, Upper Deck Jerk Guy. If you could have one superpower, why would it be the leaping ability of Cohen Carr? That would be pretty rad, I'll be honest.
Jonesy, can you imagine if you had the leaping ability of Cohen Carr?
I could reach things that you reach on a normal basis.
Yeah, your life would be worth living for once. And finally, from the Upper Deck Jerk Guy,
But it'll be longer than yours.
that's fine. I'll take.
Aw.
The actuary tables are fine. I'll take a more full life.
Oh, there it is. A fuller life. Golly.
Next up, and finally, to Plum, our listener guest, who's been slighted again in our description on
that's
social
right.
media.
That's
You guys
easy.
befriended Grooch, an act of charity, or did you lose a bet? Befriended is giving me a lot of credit.
It really
so
is.
that's
That
nice.
word is doing a lot of expending a lot of energy there.
Mhm.
But acquaintancing doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? No bets were lost. This is the thing people don't understand. Outside of the podcast, he's even more horrible, and we don't really free not to be friends with him, I guess is how I would frame it.
And smelly, and all of that unspeakable stuff that happens in my garage, minor surgeries.
Yeah, and the consuming of that.
Mm-hmm. Mostly foreskins. Anyway, gentlemen,
Setting.
it's been a wonderful week. I'm super glad Graham was here. I'm sure he appreciated that end of the episode. Look, I don't know that it can get worse than this. Go green.
Go white.
Go white.
No. Stop that.
Smooth operator. I drop top of my whip, baby. That car driving make you feel some type of way. I know you do. That custom brightly make you feel some type of way. I'm shining, ho. This bitch on we got me feeling some type of way.